Experience Friday edition. We're doing it late on a Friday because we got to get these injuries down pat. So we got the injury report coming up, plus the ownership projections and pivot plays for the Week 9 DraftKings Millionaire Maker coming up a little bit with Ben Rasa from fanvice.com. And yes, kind of looks like Rick Moranis. Don't let that fool you. The guy knows, and he wins a ton of money, so you want to listen to what he has to say. And we'll get deeper into some of these injury situations and who it opens up market share for that you could potentially squeeze onto your DraftKings lineup this week. But let's just get right into it. Oh, don't be afraid to give the show a like either. That would be super helpful. And we did this earlier in the week for the DraftKings show, but if you have a favorite wide receiver below $4,000 this week, leave it in the comment section, leave your DraftKings name, and we move into our new studio. We're going to be having a big giveaway, so you want to get in the draw. Get as many entries as you can. Now, only one per show, but if you just do it on every show when we announce one of these competitions, then you're good to go. Let's talk about the guys that are out. Deshaun Watson, he's not going to play. That's unfortunate, but if you want my full spin on the situation along with me, Pierce Dietrich, and Jeff Ulrich, go to facebook.com/thepme or on the DraftKings Facebook page. You can find everything up there in depth, but the quick version is downgrade everyone. DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. Lamar Miller might actually be all right because with Tom Savage, you probably don't want to pass too much, so just run. Donta Foreman might actually get a bit more run in this game too. Ryan Griffin probably not severely affected because he wasn't a high upside guy anyway, and what do crappy quarterbacks love? They love tight ends. So Deshaun Watson out for the year with a torn ACL. Sucks, but that's where we're going to be at. More guys that are out this week. Actually, you know what? Let's go to Elliott for a second. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I've repeated myself like 48 times, and he's going to play, so that's good news. So play Ezekiel Elliott. The other Dallas running backs, don't play them. It's that easy. So there's your Ezekiel Elliott spin. More guys that are out right now. Jordan Reed not playing with a hamstring injury. Niles Paul not going to play either. And with Jamison Crowder doubtful right now, this really makes Vernon Davis, he's a must-play guy. He might be a bit chalky on DraftKings, and we'll get to that, but Jack Doyle looks like he's going to soak up a lot of ownership in that area anyway. Lock and load Vernon Davis, he's good to go. Ryan Grant ends up becoming a sleeper in this spot. He's super cheap, too. He can end up on the field a lot more than Terrell Pryor, so people are going to go to Pryor, people are going to Dox and Grant. Might be the Redskins receiving option that you might want to look for, and it kind of coincides with some Seattle injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Earl Thomas has been ruled out with a hamstring problem, so it's going to be a little bit easier for them to pass, although when you look at it, Trent Williams isn't going to be on their offensive line again. They're going to be down 4 offensive linemen, so Kirk Cousins may not have time to pass, but it's an interesting situation if you want to take a chance. Terrence West not going to play with a calf injury again. He may never play again, so that makes the Collins-West split between those two. Only Danny Woodhead going to be coming back in 2 weeks, most likely. He's already practicing, so go stash him if you can. Tyler Boyd is not going to be playing for the Bengals this week with a knee injury. The doubtful players of the week, I already talked about Jamison Crowder. He didn't practice on Friday, probably not going to play, so make sure to get him out of any lineup that you may have him in. Trent Williams also probably not going to play with a knee injury. CJ Prosciutz with an ankle injury in the Seattle backfield. Unlikely is a game-time decision, but the guy hasn't been practicing. I would not expect Prosciutz to be on the field. And one of the late ones, Martellus Bennett with a shoulder injury. Obviously, we're not going to know this until the Monday night game, but you probably didn't want to play Martellus Bennett with Brett Hundley anyway, so just don't play him. Find a better option. Go stream Vernon Davis. Go stream Ed Dixon. Hell, use Ryan Griffin or Tyler Higbee if you have to. Play them all over Martellus Bennett this week. The probables, this is a big list, and it looks like all of these guys are going to play, so treat them as normal. Delaney Walker's really the only one that is somewhat problematic. He got in a limited session on Friday. He's dealing with that ankle injury. He didn't practice 2 weeks ago on Friday, ended up playing anyway, and then hurt a new part of his body. He was going with a calf injury. Now he has an ankle injury. But if he's going to play, you probably have to play him. If not, Jonnu Smith would be another guy that I'd just play over Martellus Bennett if Delaney Walker doesn't play. Also, super cheap on DK too, should Walker end up sitting. But more probables, Emmanuel Sanders looks like he is good to go with his ankle. Cole Beasley passed concussion protocol. Rob Kelly and his ankle injury, he good. Corey Davis and his hamstring, looks like he's going to be fine as well, along with Delaney Walker. Devonta Freeman shoulder injury will not keep him out. Marquise Lee is dealing with a knee injury. He's expected to play. Dede Westbrook could be a healthy inactive this week as he works his way back into the receiving core in Jacksonville. So watch out for that situation if you were really desperate in rolling him out there. Andre Ellington going to play, as is Zach Ertz with a hamstring injury. Again, when it comes to Zach Ertz, you're going to be playing him, but he might not have the same sort of upside that he has. So on DraftKings, I'd probably go to Travis Kelce over Ertz in this spot. Both are going to be lower owned. I mean, they're not going to be unowned, but they're going to be lower owned because they're so goddamn expensive to fit into your lineup. But Zach Ertz could be a decent contrarian play here, though. But even up against a Denver defense, which is softer towards the middle of the field, he could be somewhat limited with that hamstring problem. So watch out for that. Fortunately, looks like he's going to play. Other guys, Mike Wallace and his back are going to be on the field more than likely, as is Joe Flacco with his concussion. Expect Devontae Parker back, and all of the Oakland DBs are basically out, so that's a nice spot to get him back in. Jake Cutler could be a streamer as well. And then Sterling Shepard and his ankle, we'll see for the first time since Odell, he and Brandon Marshall all went down. He's the only one coming back, so expect a lot of targets for Sterling Shepard this week. That's it for the injury report. Let's bring in Ben Rasa from fanvice.com to talk about the biggest chalk plays this week and some players you can pivot onto. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Pat Mayo Experience. Now bringing in Ben Rasa from fanvice.com and using fansharesports.com to talk about the most talked about players from each position of the week and who are going to be the most popular, and are they good chalk or are they bad chalk, and some potential pivot plays that you can go on to in the Sunday Millionaire Maker. So, Ben, what's going on, dude?
Hello, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Yeah. It's nice to be on talk a little NFL instead of golf for a change. It's nice.
Yeah, I think it's the first time you've been on for football, hasn't it?
Yeah. No, I'm usually sweating the cut right about now, so it's a nice change of pace.
Well, you are sweating the cut right about
That is
now.
true, but at least, you know what? I'll revisit that after the show.
Yeah, I was pumped for Bubba. This is going to really date the show, but I was pumped for Bubba Watson this morning. He reeled off 4 birdies in a row. I was like, I got a ton of Bubba. This is great news. Went to the gym, came back out, and he was like 2 over par somehow.
Yep. Yeah, Bubba's doing Bubba-like things, sadly.
All right, well, let's talk football. Let's talk running backs as it pertains to the Millionaire Maker. And at the very top, we got Adrian Peterson. Is going to be the highest started, at least projected-wise, running back of the week. Lamar Miller comes in at number 2, but obviously with the Deshaun Watson injury, all the Texans are probably going to drop off. But if we don't expect Lamar Miller to be the second highest owned running back and his ownership to drop off a little bit, do you still think he's a nice play here with the Texans still as favorites? Now with a backup quarterback, maybe they decide to lean on the run a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think he's, out of obviously all the weapons are going to take somewhat of a hit, but he gets it a lot less than obviously Hopkins and Fuller. You have to assume with Tom Savage, their goal is going to be not to let him lose the game. And the best way to do that is just to lean on the run, pound the rock. It's the Colts. It's not exactly like they're facing a tough team. So I'm sure they're going to try to just get a win, get by, and then revisit how they can actually make the season a success.
All right, so the rest of the top 10 in rankings, again, it's Adrian Peterson and then Lamar Miller, Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey, that awful Mark Ingram, Elvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Alex Collins, Orleans Darkwa, and Aaron Jones, who's on the primetime slate, so I wouldn't worry too much about him as we're talking about the Sunday slate. Do you really think that, like, Alex Collins and Orleans Darkwa should be played? Like, give me, like, Marlon Mack or even Thomas Rawls against the Redskins rather than those 2 losers.
I'm gonna jump on board with you there. I actually am pretty surprised they're that high in tags. Marlon Mack is a guy who they're starting to realize, kind of like Mixon in a similar spot, that they just have to get this guy more touches. You know, he's explosive. The Texans defense, kind of like their whole team now, is just they're losing guys left and right. And at that price tag, 4,100, the upside is gigantic. But the one thing with running backs, I think overall this week that's kind of interesting is, and it happens every week these days, Zeke was out, now Zeke's back. So that's going to change the whole narrative. It looked like it was a pretty easy spot to pay down, but paying up, going all the way to the top with that late news could change some things.
Well, what do you expect his ownership to come in at? Because, like, Dak's being hyped, Dez is being hyped. No one was going to really use the Cowboys running backs anyway because there was too much risk involved. But do you see sort of a downturn in Dak and Dez and Zeke ending up at, like, 10, 15%?
Yeah, I think he's going to be over 10%. I'm not sure he gets as high as he probably would have been if none of this had happened. Everyone kind of made or thought about their teams with him not being a choice, which bumped up Dak, bumped up Dez, and it seemed like paying up at QB was kind of the way to go. So he might be a little under-owned than he would, but I don't think it gets extreme. I still do think overall people will pay down.
So a few of the running backs that aren't really being talked up at all, and one of them I'm really surprised about is Carlos Hyde. That at 5,200 with the market share that he's going to get, everyone knows kind of breathing down his neck. There's been a couple weeks where he's scored a touchdown, but like when you look at the snap counts, it's still all Hyde. This is going to be, at least by Vegas, a very close game. It's only a 2-point spread, so you can see Hyde getting like 20 touches here, and that entire area of the low 5,000s, like no one's using DeMarco Murray, no one's using Joe Mixon, no one's using C.J. Anderson, no one's using Carlos Hyde. Like, it's kind of surprising. Even Doug Martin falls into that stretch as well. Like, is it best to kind of target those guys? They're very capable to pay down for. Like, they're not expensive running backs. That instead of using Miller or using McCaffrey or using Peterson, just use a collection of those guys instead?
So I think it's going to be a dead range because, like you talked about, the 6K range with McCaffrey and those guys is going to be hit pretty hard, and a lot of people I think will go even lower and punt with someone like Mac. So those guys right around 5,000 is pretty interesting. Hyde especially, just because he's got the volume, and Mixon, who the Jaguars' defense is obviously legit, but they're more legit with the pass. So I think he's an explosive player. You kind of have to rely on a deep run, a swing pass, break something. But I don't mind in a tournament, like the Millionaire Maker, where you're looking for those crazy scores to take a stab in that range at pretty low ownership for across the board.
Do you have a preference for any of them? Because I would use Carlos Hyde in cash. Like, I don't care. It's good savings, and I know he's going to get touches. But like someone like DeMarco Murray, who no one is using it's a tougher matchup against the Ravens, but it's not insurmountable by any means. And if it just turns out to be one of those games where the split's like 85 Murray, 15 Henry, then you're dancing.
The Titans running backs, man, I don't know what to make. Every time I think I have a handle on it, they switch it up on me, or one will get nicked up. I'll probably be avoiding them, but yeah, Hyde for cash I think is somewhat fine. When you're getting that kind of volume with that price tag, it's hard to really challenge it. And then for me, again, Mixon, it would definitely be GPPs only, just because I think he's just explosive. So you only need a couple touches, and then you have to keep an eye on. I'm assuming he plays, but Devontae Freeman's a little banged up. If he's limited, Coleman right there at 47 is someone I'll definitely have.
Yeah, and the only other one I really considered from this range, and this is more of a cash game play, was Buck Allen at 43. Like, they're dogs in the game. They're probably going to be passing a lot, and when that's the case, he tends to pile up like 5, 6, 7 catches.
They're like the Titans. The Ravens running backs, God, I never get them right either. Yeah, you would have to assume if they're trailing, game script goes Tim Collins, is more of a bruiser, downhill runner than Buck Allen. So I don't mind it there. I just worry sometimes that he just kind of gets phased out of the offense. You think he's going to get a ton of volume. It's not as secure as someone like Hyde, who you kind of assume 20 touches seems very likely.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that the safety with Allen isn't there. But if people are using Collins, like, what realistically is Collins' upside? Like, even in a game where they won 40-0, he still split snaps, like, almost down the middle. Carries, receptions, snaps. Didn't matter what it was with Buck Allen, so I don't expect that to change.
No, I'm surprised that Collins is getting the tags that you mentioned there. I really don't see that, and his upside is capped because of that timeshare, and he's not catching many passes. He has a lot of touchdown equity. That's where he's going to have to make it. You're going to need him to get in the end zone to return value.
Can you explain to me this Orleans Darkwa thing? Because people are like, Orleans Darkwa, what a play, what a price. And Paul Perkins might even be back this week, so now they have 4 running backs, none of whom are any good, but they're all going to eat each other's tails.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I think Wayne Gallman's the best guy, and I thought he was about to emerge, and now he's buried again. That's a situation with the Giants that I'm completely avoiding. I'll let other people try to chase there, and I'll go to spots where I think the volume's more secure or the upside's greater.
All right, let's switch to receivers, and this is going to change a little bit because DeAndre Hopkins was number 3 on the tag list, but Dez Bryant's number 1, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, T.Y. Hilton, Devin Funches, Tyreek Hill, Will Fuller, Marvin Jones, Larry Fitzgerald, and Mike Evans are the top 10 in terms of who you should be starting. Now, obviously, Marvin Jones on the primetime slate, so he will not be eligible for the Millionaire Maker, but, is more than 2% of the field going to use DeAndre Hopkins here? Does he become a good contrarian play? Do you just want nothing to do with him? It's really costly to get him in.
Yeah, that's the problem. I would honestly lean towards it would be a decent leverage spot because everyone who had him or plan to have him sees this news, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to bump down to Mike Evans, to Julio, to Michael Thomas. The problem is at 9,200, you're just relying on Savage to have a game, and I really think that the way that the Texans control this game is with Lamar Miller on the ground, and that Hopkins just doesn't have the volume to get there.
Well, I guess the thing would be that if you didn't want to pay the $9,200 for DeAndre Hopkins, but still wanted exposure, that, hey, maybe Savage isn't bad. Why wouldn't you just use Savage at 46?
Yeah, no, if I do end up having, I mean, I doubt I have Fuller just because that guy's touchdown regression is happening sooner rather than later. It just has to. But yeah, if I take Hopkins, I think you have to use Savage in that spot just because at that price tag, you really are relying on Savage to have a game where he's returning value as well.
All right, so guys that are outside of the top 10, no one's going to be using Julio, and even fewer people are going to be using A.J. Green. So if you want to talk about like a leverage spot, A.J. Green would make more sense because A, he's cheaper, and B, at least he has his regular quarterback throwing the ball. He just has the worst matchup of the week, unfortunately. So is he a contrarian play, or is he just a bad play?
They're going to get him the target, so I do think it's somewhat of a leverage play. Everyone sees, Jaguars secondary, and I touched upon it earlier, they are really legit. So it is scary. Jalen Ramsey, I think, is quickly becoming, one of the best players in the league. I probably will pivot to him in certain spots from Michael Thomas and from Evans, just because I think he just is one of those receivers where it's not matchup proof, but man, if you can get him 5% or less, it's worth exposure if you're running a ton of teams. Obviously, a couple teams, I think that all the guys around him, Julio, Mike Evans, and Michael Thomas are where you want to be. But for a leverage spot in a game that I think since he will score and move the ball in, I don't mind it.
All right, so Dez, let's say you don't want to use Dez. He's going to be too popular. Where are the moves there? Because I think that Doug Baldwin is kind of the move.
Yeah, well, I've been high on Russell Wilson and the Seahawks week after week, and obviously last week that worked out good. So I'm going to continue there. Tyreek Hill, I mean, he's the king of those guys that, he only needs a couple touches because he's just so incredibly explosive. Obviously Benjamin is not playing. He's not on the Panthers anymore, so you can go down to someone like Funchess. I mean, that's a big discount in terms of price. But, the two guys right above Dez, Tyreek and Doug Baldwin, are both guys I definitely plan to have exposure to.
I don't know if I would play Tyreek in cash. I do like him this week. He's going to be like an overexposed player on my GPP teams. But, there's always the downside that he doesn't break off the big one. He doesn't do anything. So I think I would prefer Baldwin in cash. I mean, even when you talk about ownership, you don't really need to weigh it that much in 50-50. So if Dez is still fine. But cash game lock, GPP lock, I don't care how popular he's going to be. I think just putting Funchess in your lineup gives you a very good base, and it's a lot of savings. Like, I wouldn't really overthink that.
No, I wouldn't either. Obviously, like I said, when these prices came out, that news wasn't there. Prices. Funchess is not priced in to his role right now, so you're getting a steal there. And yes, just a second, Tyreek, don't do that in cash pretty much ever. The guy, just the way he plays, it's not conducive to a cash game lineup.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about T.Y. Hilton, too. Like, I love T.Y. for GPPs, but in cash, it's like, oh, no thanks.
Nope. Yeah, his range of outcomes is absurd. Now, his price is really getting down there, and it's hard not to buy when he's sub 5K just because, he has those, 4 catches, 120 yards, touchdown game, and that obviously gets you there with plenty of upside in a matchup that I don't think is overly difficult with the Texans.
Okay, so you have Michael Thomas. He's the second most tagged guy of the week. He's $7,200. I think he might be bad chalk. I'd rather have Evans, who's number 10.
It's going to be interesting because the problem I have with Michael Thomas is that when you take Breeze, who's going to be, I think, one of the most popular quarterbacks, especially with Watson going down, everyone is going to pair him up with Michael Thomas, so you don't really gain that much advantage. And the way you want to do it is leverage a team kind of as a one-off. If you can get a stack that's a differentiation, that's how you really can make a move. I like the other side of that game. I think Tampa is really interesting. Winston's a little banged up, but he slings it. He doesn't care. And Mike Evans is obviously a beast. The Saints defense playing better. But yeah, I actually agree with you. I'm looking more towards Mike Evans at, I think, significantly less ownership than Michael Thomas this week.
Yeah, he will be supremely lesser owned, but just even look at the way that the Saints are running their offense now. Like, they're 7-point favorites in this game. Obviously, they're going to pass, but they're leaning more and more and more on the run every single week. And between Ingram, who's getting 15% of the target share, and Kamara, who's getting 15% of the target share, like, there's just not a ton to go around. It's not like Michael Thomas is burning people down the field and catching 60-yard touchdowns. I mean, that's Ted Ginn.
Ted Ginn. Yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas, for me, I do think is still cash playable because he's just getting enough receptions. He's pretty solid, that volume. But the upside is limited, like you carved out. They're getting Breeze these easy swing passes. They're leaning on the run with the two-headed monster, and it's working. That's the other thing. When a team is doing something that's working, they really don't have that much incentive to change the whole, narrative. And I expect Ingram and Kamara to do a lot of heavy lifting this week.
All right, on a short slate week where, there's no London game, so that's kind of nice, but no Sunday nighter, no Monday nighter, no Thursday nighter, 6 teams on bye. Concentration and ownership at quarterback might actually go up a little bit like it normally would not. So at the top, it's Dak Prescott. He's number 1. He's followed by Breeze, Deshaun Watson. Obviously, don't use him at this point. Jacoby Brissett, Russell Wilson, Alex Smith, Jared Goff, Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, and Carson Wentz. So if Deshaun was going to be used, he was 8,100, so you had to pay up for him anyway. I didn't like doing that all that much to begin with. But where do you think this all goes? Like, I was surprised to see Russell Wilson 5th in tags down in the Alex Smith territory. Those are the 2 guys I really like this week. And I think that with the return of Ezekiel Elliott, that Dak might not have the same sort of upside anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Wilson is going to get actually a lot of both. Obviously, the Deshaun, all of it is going to be filtered amongst other people. But I think now that a lot of people see that Zeke's coming back, Dak is going to take somewhat of an ownership hit. He'll still be popular. But, man, Breeze and Russell Wilson are going to get definitely increased ownership, which makes it a little tougher because I was on Wilson too. They have no run game. They have to literally pass for every single opportunity. So, it's hard not to like him at home too. And then other than that, it's pretty wide open, but it is going to be condensed. There's not that many playable quarterbacks on the slate with the injuries and the buys and whatnot.
So I like Brissett. I think it's a solid matchup. But, at this point, if he's going to – it's hard to say if he's going to be chalky or not because I think that of the lower-end quarterbacks, it kind of gets divvied up between Brissett and probably Jared Goff in the same spot. But if you want, guys that no one is owning, I'm going to just switch to page 2 here of the tags. No one's playing Flacco. Probably for good reason, but no one's playing Mariota. The sentiment against him is the worst of any player in football this week. 2 start tags, 7 sit tags. Very rarely do you see someone get up to 7 sit tags. They're coming off a bye. Yeah, the Ravens are good, but Mariota is a guy that wins people Millionaire Makers 3 times a year.
Yep, he is almost an ideal type of play in this situation. No one is on him. Coming off a bye, he's at home, and the Ravens, obviously, their defense is solid, but on the road, I don't think it's as elite. And, man, 6K, that's massive upside. They were obviously somewhat condensing his running upside because he tweaked the hammy. I think he's hopefully back to full health, and you got to keep an eye on Delaney Walker. That is a concern because that's one of his biggest weapons. But, man, at a sub possibly 5%, you could do a lot worse than him. And for me, again, I think Jameis is interesting right there as well. Another guy that I don't think will be too popular.
Yeah, I think Jameis will be. I'll be using some of Jameis. I think he's more like a 5%er. I think Mariota's going to be like a 1%er.
Yeah, that right there. If he's in that kind of ownership range, it's really hard to turn that down because, like you said, he's the type of guy when you have running upside too, you can blow the doors off the upside like most of the other pocket passers can. And if you get that kind of Mariota game where he has 35-40, now you're in a elite company with that ownership.
Yeah, so I think that kind of speaks to the example that you're using there with the running quarterback. It's like when no one uses Cam, just use Cam and see if it works out. And same as Russell Wilson and all those guys where, if no one's using Andy Dalton in a good matchup, what's Andy Dalton really going to do for upside? He's going to have to throw so much and throw so many touchdowns. There's no other avenue for him to massively outscore all the other quarterbacks, where with Mariota there is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a key thing with these guys, and when they're cheap too. Those rushing yards are super valuable with a tag like this.
Any other quarterbacks you're interested in? No one's owning Dalton, no one's owning Eli, no one's owning Cousins. That could be interesting with no Earl Thomas and no offensive line.
That's where I was going. I mean, I've never seen they literally have no offensive line. He's going to be running for his life on the road. The only other guy I think is somewhat interesting. Where's Matt Ryan on the tags?
Matt Ryan is 16th at quarterback, and everyone is saying he is the second most sittable player behind Mariota in terms of what the industry is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I see the narrative to why you would say that, but another guy, leverage spot. Obviously, he doesn't have the running upside like Mariota, but in a game that I think could be sneaky high scoring with the Panthers, I'd look there in a high leverage situation.
Well, wasn't Carolina the Week 3 team last year? Everyone benched Julio against them, and then Julio scored, I had like 300 yards.
Yeah, that's like one of those games. He's been killing me all year, so maybe I'm biased, but Julio is going to have one of his Julio games at some point in the season. And last week, throw that game out, it was a monsoon with the Jets. That wasn't a realistic situation for them, and I was on him last week. I would have been on him really heavily, so I think that's an interesting pair when you can get Matt Ryan and Julio both not popular in a week.
Yeah, that is somewhat interesting. Like, Matt Ryan's going to be less than 1%. Now, Julio will never get down to that level because he's still Julio, but you're probably looking at like 3 to 6.
Yeah, I mean, if you can combine those two for sub 15%, which I think is definitely going to happen this week, that's definitely a giant upside and a nice spot to be in.
And then you can go chalk everywhere else too if you want to.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with these tournaments. You don't have to differentiate on every spot. If you have an area and an avenue that no one is really going to be on, you can pretty much stay with the field for the rest of the slots and then kind of bank on that specific thing to get you over the top.
All right, let's switch to tight ends. Jack Doyle comes in at number 1, by far the most start tags. He's followed by Jimmy Graham, then VD, Vernon Davis, Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee, Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce, Jared Cook, who is not on the main slate, Ed Dixon, and then Ryan Griffin. That was with Watson, although I think that Griffin is the one guy in the Texans offense who might stand to benefit from Tom Savage playing.
Yeah, he's similar. I actually agree. Lamar Miller doesn't benefit, but you have to think that Tom Savage, they're going to tone it down, give him easy throws, and someone like Griffin, safety blanket, actually could increase his volume.
If Doyle's going to be the absolute chalk, is he still a play because of the volume that he's been seeing?
I'm looking elsewhere, honestly. I don't think he's that type, where you have Ertz and those guys who the with is just a little more secure, and he's more of a hybrid. That game last week was ridiculous. I think it's more of an outlier, and I wouldn't be stunned to see Doyle come, with a 3-4 catches, 40 yards, which, is not that upside you're looking for. And if the ownership is that condensed at tight end, I actually like to pivot and go to a more lower owned, because I think the position as a whole has a lot of variance.
Well, I mean, Evan Ingram seems like a very interesting one in this spot. $5,600. Now, the return of Sterling Shepard, who we didn't talk about, who I actually think is kind of a nice pivot play as well, that if he's going to go sub 10%, maybe 5%, he's been getting double-digit targets every single week. We know what his upside is. Don't love the matchup against the Rams, but if he's just going to soak in, 30% of Eli's targets in a game where they're at home, yet they're not favored, so they're probably going to have to throw, it makes a lot of sense for Evan Ingram, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Evan Ingram, he's a tight end, but he's really not. I mean, he's like a hybrid. He's basically a wide receiver. And I expect most people who pay up, especially in that specific range, just to go Jimmy Graham. I really like Jimmy Graham this week. I think he's going to be popular, but for good reason. So if you're looking to get away from that herd, Evan Ingram, the targets are going to be there by default because, like you said, Shepard's coming back, but they don't have any other weapons. I expect the game to be somewhat high scoring. They're going to have to keep up. Janoris Jenkins on their side is not playing, so that helps Goff score some points. And then for me, I'm really going to be keeping an eye on this Delaney Walker news. If he's out, there's a guy who I've been waiting to play named Jonnu Smith, who will have, super low ownership, I would assume. More of a punt play, but someone that I'm interested to see.
Delaney practiced Friday on a very limited basis, but we saw him do this even before the bye week that he didn't practice on Friday. It looked like he wasn't going to play, then all of a sudden he was playing.
Yeah, that was bizarre. He was trending to be out, and then he was just back in the lineup. So I'm not sure what to make of that situation. Other than that, though, it's pretty slim at tight end. I think that, like you said, Doyle sucks up most of that ownership. And then if you pay up, it's probably Jimmy Graham who sucks up the ownership. So a guy like Ingram could get lost.
Well, I mean, people say that they might play Travis Kelce. Like, all the start tags are there, but he's $6,700. It's a lot like Ertz, who's dealing with a hamstring problem, but he's going to play as well. It's just they're so expensive, it kind of prices people out of that spot. But is there any tight end this week who's in a better spot than Kelce in a high-scoring game against a team that can't really cover big guys in the middle of the field?
Yeah, if I go all the way up, obviously, Kelce is... I mean, he's in just an absolutely great spot, and you saw last week that he has the upside to get there, like Gronk and like Ertz, but if Ertz is nicked up, I think it's a pretty easy choice for Kelce. And then, yeah, I don't know. I'm just looking it down. It's pretty ugly here, man. Between the buys and the short slate, there's not a lot of options here for tight end.
The two that I would go with if I was going to pay down, and let's say Delaney does play, so you can't use Smith, I think Ed Dixon at 31 makes some sense without Benjamin around. He's now the next big guy in the red zone that they could pass to. And then Tyler Higbee, who is getting talked up. He has 12 start tags, but I don't think a lot of people are going to use Tyler Higbee, to be perfectly honest with you, since most people don't know who he is. But yeah, against the Giants, that's a really soft matchup. People like Goff. It makes some sense to me. But Vernon Davis... everything is shaping up for him to have such a gigantic week. No Reed, no Niles Paul, no Jamison Crowder. He's just going to be on the field so much that it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't love the Redskins matchup as a whole, but you just talked about they have limited options, and I assume they're going to be trailing. So Vernon Davis, who he's been better than I thought every step of the way, and he's playing good without all those guys, without Reed especially. The targets are going to be there. I do worry just Cousins. I mean, that whole game, it could get out of control. I really think they're going to have some problems being in Seattle. But we saw, I didn't think the Texans would score like that. So obviously Seattle's defense is still legit, but they're not what they once were. And Cousins, he'll sling it. So Vernon Davis is one of the only weapons he can really rely on.
If all those guys end up sitting, like right now, it's appearing like Reed's already out, Paul's going to be out, but we don't know if Jamison Crowder is going to be out or not. It's looking that way. That's how it's shaping up. But does Ryan Grant become a play at like $3,000?
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to look him. You have Josh Doxson, who I'm not really sold on. I'd actually probably rather take Ryan Grant because I think most people when they see that are gonna think to go to Doxson, and Ryan Grant will have, even if all those guys are sitting, I would assume 1-2%. Not a lot of people are going to be on him. He's going to be the absolute min. So when you can get a guy down there, you can really open up the rest of your lineup and take some studs. That's the kind of play you would want if you want to go get someone like Travis Kelce, to get that salary.
Yeah, you could do that. Or I was even thinking about in the San Francisco game that you could go after Taylor at the min, or you could go after Eldrick Robinson with Garcon out and Patrick Peterson likely on Marquise Goodwin now.
Yeah, I've been waiting for Aldrick Robinson week for like 5 years, I think, at this point. So it's due. With Garcon out, and yeah, they're going to take away Goodwin, which shouldn't be hard, especially for Patrick Peterson. It's limited options. Kittle seems to have had his little flash and kind of came and went. So the other receivers, pretty unproven. I think you can go there. I'm not sure about the upside. I'd rather go with Aldrick just because he's more of a home run guy than Taylor. But it's definitely a spot that I'll monitor. I'm not sure how high scoring that game is overall.
Yeah, I mean, both teams, I think, are projected for fewer than 20 points right now, at least by team totals. But Trent Taylor, I mean, he returns punts for them. Like, he has explosion. He was the one who came in when Garcon left last week to take over that spot. Like, I just think he's going to be on the field a lot. They're probably going to have to pass eventually. They play a super fast pace of play, and now I'm trying to talk myself into, like, Hyde and Trent Taylor in cash games, which sounds like a losing lineup. But he's $3,000. Like, you can do so much with him if he's in there.
Yeah, I mean, that is the key. Obviously, if you can get a guy at that price tag who's on the field for the majority of snaps, it's really hard to not justify the play. And when you do that, it really opens up the rest of your lineup to some of those really elite players. Yeah, it's hard when you start picking the Niners, it's like, my God, am I really going here? But at home, I think this is a kind of game that they could win. They're going to win eventually, similar to the Browns. And the Cardinals are not too good themselves. So I don't mind it. I still will go with Aldrick. I'm a little biased towards that guy. and I just think the talent is there. But definitely an interesting spot overall, honestly.
All right, well, instead of those two guys, what about Russell Shepard at $3,100?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Carolina, that's obviously a spot where you're going to exploit because no one truly knows where those targets fall. I think most people think it's going to go to McCaffrey, obviously Funchess. He's interesting, Curtis Samuel too.
I don't see Curtis Samuel playing a ton of snaps, and I was kind of on the McCaffrey's going to see a higher volume now because Kelvin Benjamin is gone. But Leone was on Wednesday's show, and he kind of made the point, it's like, how many more targets can they really give him?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the guy's seeing it's not his targets; he's just not breaking away. He's getting those easy 10 swing passes a game. It feels like. If the game, like I said, I really think, and I know for me, one of the things I'm going to be doing is definitely stacking that game because I think it's going to be under-owned in general. You know, if you take, we talked about this before, some guys on the Falcons, and then you take those weapons from the Panthers, you can make a pretty interesting stack. Russell Shepard, close to the min, he's another one. You have to assume, obviously Funchess is in the driver's seat, but it's not like Funchess is getting all those targets. If he picks up that slack, 3,100, I mean, it's pretty hard not to pay that off if he's on the field for that many snaps.
Yeah, when Benjamin sat earlier this year, he was playing between 65 and 85% of the offensive snaps. So he's going to be on the field. He's probably a better play than those San Francisco guys.
Yeah, sadly, as much as I want to say I'm still going Aldrick Robertson, I definitely lean here just because, again, there's a void. And I know Garcon is out, so that does change things. But with Kelvin Benjamin out and gone, it's going to open it up. And although I do think Funchess is a good play and I will have plenty, I don't think it's a shoo-in that he's just going to assert himself in that number one role. Cam's going to have to look elsewhere, and that's a really good point. You know, how many more passes can McCaffrey take? I mean, he's already doing what they kind of set him out to do. He's just not really been as explosive as I think most thought. So definitely look to that new number 2 receiver in the Panthers.
Any other, like, cheap sleepers at any position you can really think of? Because the only other one I really have, and I think you could use him in cash if you wanted to, probably not necessary, but Jeremy Maclin's going to play. He's only $4,000. He's playing the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of the Ravens' offense is basically blacklisted in my book right now. I just really don't know if any of them have the upside. Even when Maclin catches a touchdown, you know, it seems like he's going to blow his tag out of the water, and then he's just so quiet for the rest of the game. You know, the guy who maybe is not as big of a sleeper as I thought he was, I was going to mention, you know, Higbee on my own. He was someone I looked at pretty strongly with off as the cheap tight end. I like that price. And the Giants just don't really scare me. I expect him to have somewhat of a big game, and I don't think he'll be too popular on a week where it's a weak position overall.
All right, last guy at tight end. I know we kind of veered off tight ends for a second. You mentioned Delaney Walker. Let's say Delaney does play. Is he playable?
It's tough, you know, because, you know, if you're using Mariota, I think he is. If you get word that he's full go, you know, he's not super messed up and going to, like, try to give it a go. If he does, I don't mind that with you. I mean, you're talking, again, a super low-owned stack. Obviously, you do have to give the edge to Jimmy Graham. I really like that spot. I know he's going to be chalk, but in my opinion, he's one of the better chalk options of the week. I just think that him and Wilson got it going last week, luckily, because I really needed that. And after that first half, it looked ugly. If Delaney was a little cheaper, I'd be a lot more enthusiastic about that. The problem is 4,900, you know, he can't just kind of catch a couple balls. He still needs to go out there and have a pretty good day.
I guess the good thing about Mariota is that you can just use Mariota and not worry about it.
Yep, that's another huge benefit with the rushing side. You know, he can kind of do his own thing, and you can have so many more options where if, obviously, like we talked about before, not that I'm really going there, but if you play DeAndre Hopkins, you have to take Tom Savage, in my opinion. You just have to, because there's no other way that he gets there, and there's plenty of quarterbacks same way. They're not going to run, so you just know that those receivers by default, at least one of them is going to have a big game.
Yeah, well, it's almost like the Julio situation. If Julio has such a big week that he wins you the week, you may as well play Matt Ryan with him.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's what kind of drew me in. I was higher on Julio than I was on Matt Ryan. But by default, like you said, if Julio goes nuts, it's hard to fathom that Matt Ryan at that tag doesn't have a big game.
All right, let's close this off with defenses, and this one's pretty easy to tell you the truth because there are two defenses that everyone appears to be using. They're either paying up for the Jags in a great spot, but even more people are now paying down a little bit. and using the Eagles against Brock Osweiler. I am a big fan of both of these defenses this week, but I think you're going to see all the ownership concentrated right there. After them in the tags, and their tags are way above all the other ones. It's the Texans, the Rams, the Broncos, Seahawks, Cardinals, Panthers, Saints. Like, who is the pivot defense here? Like, I like the Rams. I understand the Broncos. I think they can get to Wentz a little bit. Maybe they can score a touchdown. But if they're going to be used, that kind of makes some sense. What about Seattle against Washington?
Yeah, we talked about it a little earlier. The Redskins have no offensive line. They literally have everybody hurt. Cousins is going to probably still sling it, and that's the thing with the defense. Holding a team to low scoring is great, but you're more looking for those turnover opportunities. A chance to make a play, obviously get in the end zone, and there's not a lot of defenses that are better than the Seahawks at doing that. Other than them, I'm also with you. I think the Eagles, for good reason, are the chalk this week. It's hard to really argue there. I may look as a deep one-off, kind of like the Titans. I just think Flacco is absolute garbage right now, and they're just overpriced. And I expect Cincy to move the ball a little more than most. So if I pay all the way up, I would actually lean to Tennessee. And then, if you're not a believer in Tom Savage at all, you could go down to the absolute min and take the Colts. I've looked at that. I'm not ruling it out.
I think if I was going to go down and basically waste my money on a defense, I'd take the Redskins. At least they have a good pass rush, and we know that I don't know if Dwayne Brown's going to play or not, or how integrated he's going to be on the offensive line. Russell Wilson does take sacks.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. He holds the ball there. And, the Colts, it's the problem with the Colts defense, and I wanted to go there because I do like paying all the way down with the defense. I do that a lot, is that, and I keep saying this, I don't think they let Savage do anything and lose the game. They're going to be handing it off, giving him short pass. He's not going to be slinging it around. Whereas a guy like Wilson, obviously, he has to make all the plays. He's holding the ball. He's scrambling all over the place. The Redskins will get some sacks. Maybe they get a pick. Maybe they get a big play. And you never see the Broncos defense this cheap. This is probably the cheapest they'll be all year.
And listen, it's not like the Philly offensive line isn't beat up.
No. Yeah, with Peters down, that Broncos still are – their defense isn't the problem. It's that they have now they have Brock Osweiler to deal with. But it's not been them. So you got to assume that they try to limit Wentz. It's just he's been scary good.
Yeah. Ben Rasa, check him out at fanvice.com and on Twitter at JazzRazDFS. Ben, tell everyone what they can expect from you over the course of a week's worth of content.
Yeah, well, now we're in the super busy season, so we got golf going on. Obviously, you catch me on the podcast with Tim Frank, Andrew Barron, and then doing a little NBA here and there, filling in, but we got obviously a great team. And then Sundays, show right in the morning, breaking down these games in depth. So if you're interested, come on over, sign on up. I'll be talking about these plays where I'm actually going once these injury news shake out and break down the slate.
All right, thanks for being on, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me, my man.
Of course. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me at ThePME on Twitter. And, of course, you can subscribe to The Pat Mayo Experience on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Podomatic. And audio. Boom. For the audio versions, uncut, uncensored. For all the videos, go to the DraftKings YouTube page. And don't be afraid to give the show a like. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck in Week 9. I'll see you next time.